Hi again then guys, and welcome to the second High Rollers episode for Gran Turismo Sport, at least so far. I do personally hope that they add more, but it would also be helpful if they of course increase the ceiling of how much you can earn rather than just wiping out your entire bank account for the sake of one car. But of course you can win it. I never win decent cars on Gran Turismo Sport, so I don't bother waiting for them anymore, I just buy them, and that's what I did with both the Ferrari and this one. In fact, I did it in about the space of 2 weeks. So we've now got the XJ13 to review, so how does it compare to both its direct rival, as far as the game goes, the Ferrari, but also compared to itself on Gran Turismo 6? Because of course we did review it before in this same series, just like we did with the Ferrari, but from a different game, on a different console, at a different time. Plus, one of the most important things about the differences between the games, and the tuning in particular, is that for the first time we can actually make these cars lighter. We've never been able to do that before, and that, I would say, is an even bigger advantage than anything that you can or can't do in terms of power, because the power on the cars isn't as impressive as on Gran Turismo 6. On GT6 you can get the Ferrari P4 up to, I think it was 684 horsepower, and the Jaguar to about 820, so very impressive, especially for the Jag. As far as the weight though, they stayed as they were, so the Ferrari stayed at 793, the Jag stayed at 998. Now both of those are great, so it's not awful, it's not like it weighs 3.5 tons or anything, but now we can drop that. Or at least you can drop it if you've got enough mileage points, because as I said with the Ferrari, if you upgrade just to level 2 for both power and weight, you're going to waste over 10,000 mileage points. Waste is a strong word, but I think for most of us, you're probably not going to do that if you're honest about it. You might do it if you're a super fan, especially if you've never driven it on Gran Turismo 6, because they'll feel more special, whereas for those of us who did play GT6 and bought all of these 20 million credit cars, you're probably kind of over it by now. I know I am personally. I like them, but the pizzazz is kind of gone, because I've already been there, done that, got the 20 million credit t-shirt. So, how does it compare? Well, this one I would say compares much more similarly to Gran Turismo 6 than the Ferrari does. The Ferrari has definitely had more of an improvement, at least for my money. The Jaguar was already good, it was very smooth, very controlled, highly competitive. It was a very competitive car on Gran Turismo 6. In fact, it was one of the few cars which, at certain PP levels for classics, could actually take on the Chaparrals, both the 2D and the 2J. And now that's different, because they're Gr.X, which you guys know how I feel about Gr.X. It's next to useless, it's relegated the cars to being literally just collector's pieces. That's it. You can't use them for anything but one-make racing. That is so dumb. I hope they change that, so let's just leave that to what we've already said. However, as far as the car actually performing, as I said, it is different to the Ferrari, because this one feels relatively unchanged, actually, compared to Gran Turismo 6. The handling is very similar, whereas with the Ferrari, the suspension was a bit softer, it was a little bit more authentic, in fact, considerably more authentic through corners. The sound is much louder, and again, much more realistic. It sounds like a Ferrari race car from the 60s should sound. This one actually surprised me, because in a weird kind of way, it actually, I think, doesn't sound as good now as it did on GT6, and that's one of the only occasions where I've said that about a car on the game, and that's a shame, especially when you're talking about a car that costs this much, because when you're paying 20 million credits, or if you win it, but especially if you buy it, like I did, you want it to sound good. You want to have a car that looks fantastic, that is at the very least fun to drive. You don't need it to be great, of course, you don't want it to be unrealistically good, but you want it to be enjoyable to drive, to look at, and to listen to. And the Ferrari ticks all of those boxes. Unfortunately, the Jag is not as good when it comes to sound. You can hear it kind of in this video in the background. It doesn't sound bad, it's got a nice warble to it, but it's not as raspy or as gruff as it was on Gran Turismo 6. It had a bit more of a burble to it, whereas now it's a bit more like a Viper. It's got that kind of flat, bellow kind of sound to it without any real gruffness there, which, if you're into that, that'll be pretty cool, but it just doesn't sound appropriate to the car to me. Maybe that's more realistic, but it just doesn't sit right, it doesn't feel right. Apart from that, it's still a great car. It's got a lot of power, it's heavier, of course, than the Ferrari, and consequently, the horsepower per tonne isn't quite as good. However, it's still over 500. 511 horsepower per tonne stock is nothing to be sniffed at. And of course, you can increase that considerably when you both increase the power and drop the weight. You're also looking at a pretty decent amount of torque. It's got fractionally more than the Ferrari, which might surprise you. You'd probably assume that the Jag would have a lot more torque, given that it has the bigger engine, plus it appears to be a meatier car, but not by much. The Ferrari has 385 pound-feet. This one has 386, so they're literally about as close as you can get without being the same. Overall, I would have to say, as much as I love the Jaguar, visually, there's no competition. It is my favourite of the two. In terms of performance, it is the faster of the two in a straight line, especially for top-end speed. But on Gran Turismo Sport, the Ferrari is better. And I hate to say that because I've always preferred the Jag. And I still do, in some ways, especially visually, but the Ferrari feels better, it feels more authentic, it feels fresher in terms of how much they've changed it and how different it feels. And as unimportant as it really is, but at the same time it is important, it sounds better. A whole lot better. And I don't mean the specific noise that the car makes, I mean the quality of the sound and the effort put into it. The Ferrari makes an impression. It's one of the most unique sounding cars in the game. This Jaguar, well, they've almost taken a back step in a similar way to the Ford GT, and that's a real shame, because a lot of people, myself included, really love this car on Gran Turismo 6, and it's lost a little bit of that charm. However, it's still a great vehicle, don't let me put you off. However, I would recommend that if you aren't overly bothered by it, and it's just a goal, maybe wait to win it instead. The Ferrari feels more special once you've bought it, I think, whereas this one, it's cool, but it doesn't feel quite as special anymore. However, that's it overall for this pick. Of course, I hope to bring you more episodes in this series. I'm personally really hoping that they bring back some, if not both, of the Chaparrals, maybe even a new Chaparral. That would be nice, maybe a 2F or a 2E. Chaparral has a flurry of amazing cars with amazing innovation. So that's it overall for this pick. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.